Looking back on it, it was some of the most difficult times of my life because there was so much uncertainty. But at the same time, I've never felt more confident and more able than I did at that moment, because I really leaned in to my experience, my skill set, my just my confidence in knowing that I knew how to do what I was about to do. I just needed to do it.
Welcome and welcome back. Hi, Florian. How are you doing?
Hi, Mario. Doing well, like always, when we chat.
Florian was too long in the car. He stopped flying and there's no train connection where he goes. So he's like a forced car driver. But Florian, before we rage about the bad Autobahn, How many oysters before a good dinner?
That's a tricky question because I love oysters. I mean,
So how many?
At least, just for me, half a dozen.
Okay. So this will make our friend and the next interview partner very, very happy. We have a dear friend of mine today as a guest, Travis from Singapore, but actually born in Boston, educated in the famous Cornell, married, 2 kids, and 2011, and we're going to learn why and how, he moved to the other end of the world to Singapore, opened with Luke's Oysters and Chop House in a sleepy alley in Chinatown in Singapore. I would say the best steak restaurant, definitely in Singapore, maybe even in Asia. He now has 6 restaurants, 5 of them are in Singapore, and it's everything from steak, oysters, pizza, and Mexican grill. Welcome, Travis.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction. And it's so good to see you, and nice to meet you, Florian.
Nice meeting you.
We come back hopefully to that later, but one of the best restaurant experience I had in my life was with Travis sitting on some shitty plastic stools in some Chinatown in Singapore, and had amazing, I will never forget that, amazing seafood. But anyway, that's not the topic of today. I want to talk about how much fear and Schwellenangst, the fear of threshold and borders, you must have had going to the other end of the world and not just opening a restaurant in your home turf in Boston or New York or New England or wherever, but literally at the other end of the world. How much fear and how much voices were there and say, don't do that? Or were you so confident that you say, I don't even think about that? Take us back to this 2011. Why Singapore? How do you feel back? How did you feel back then about the decision, and share a little bit the doubts about opening Luke's?
Well, I'd like to just rewind a little bit earlier than that, because my wife and I moved to Singapore in 2005 to run a restaurant group for another individual. So I had some experience in Singapore before I started to go out on my own. And in fact, the first restaurant that I opened by myself with a partner was in 2009 in Singapore. And I learned a great deal about how to do business, how to work with people at that time. And the restaurant was a great success, but the partnership ended up being quite a failure. And so that's what quickly brought us to 2011. And at that time, I was in a sort of curious circumstance of being an owner of a restaurant that I was not at anymore, having now been in litigation with that first partner for some time, almost 6 months, having no money because all of it was tied up in this restaurant, and thinking to myself, what to do? How are we going to, what is the next step? And, seriously thought about just taking a job working for a hotel or some other sort of restaurant. And then I just said to myself, you know what, I can't do that. I've worked for myself now. I know the feeling. I feel very confident in my abilities and what I can do. And I had, the benefit of a great reputation amongst the clientele in Singapore. And, I decided I just have to keep doing it, and I have to do it again. So the second step was, how do I find a partner that understands me as much as I understand how to run the business and operations of a restaurant? I really needed somebody who could trust me to lead the business and grow the business. And so I was very lucky to find a former client of mine who was willing and able to invest with me. That's really how it all started in 2011. And I wanted to just open a small oyster bar with a few seats and a bunch of oysters from around the world. And that ended up being, turned into a sort of more steakhouse, chop house with an oyster bar element to it. But, certainly that's how it all started. And, looking back on it, it was some of the most difficult times of my life because there was so much uncertainty. But at the same time, I've never felt more confident and more able than I did at that moment, because I really leaned in to my experience, my skill set, just my confidence in knowing that I knew how to do what I was about to do. I just needed to do it. And that is really what's guided me now into the future, is always thinking to myself, Travis, you know how to do it. You just have to go out there and make that first effort to get everything started. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it can be quite stressful, but, that's really, the first step I would always tell anyone is to just go out there and start, do something, do it, whatever you have in your mind. You have to make that first initial effort to just, get your foot in the door and start the process.
And Travis, as you said now, and I think that's because you're a good example now of somebody who failed with a partnership and who succeeded with one. If you have to guide the listeners out there on how to make the right choice of partners, or even like one step back, should an entrepreneur have a partner when setting up? If you reflect on these early days, you shared that just now that your money got stuck in litigation and was probably even more difficult in a foreign country. But reflecting what went wrong, without going obviously in personal detail, but what went wrong in the first partnership, and what did you learn about that to make you able to choose the second one, the right one?
Yeah, I think about this a lot because so many of my colleagues ended up getting into business with the wrong people, as I did at the beginning. And what I will say is oftentimes, especially chefs, that, I was educated as a chef, and sort of all my professional experience was in the kitchens. I think a lot of what we see in the kitchens, we think to ourselves, we need somebody to help us with the business part of running restaurants and building businesses. And a lot of us are introduced to people either through business associates or friends who have money, who say, "Oh, I always wanted to get into the restaurant business." It's very romantic. It's nice being courted. It's, we'd love to put in X amount of money to, for you to have your own restaurant. And I think a lot of us have fallen for this initially, to just get our foot in the door, to just be able to open a restaurant. We don't know how to negotiate contracts. We don't know how to understand the legal terms that surround shareholders agreements and so on and so forth. So, now what I would tell somebody is, if you choose a partner in life, it's as important when you choose a partner in business to think about all of the different elements that make a successful partnership. For me, I always want to have somebody in my life who, at the end of the day, I can have an honest and real conversation with about challenges, about difficulties, about some of the things that are not so glamorous, and have real feedback, not just I trust you, or I think you're right, or always say yes. There has to be someone who's really critical. We can have critical conversations with you. And also for me, as much as I lead the business on a day-to-day, in day-to-day operations and development and so on and so forth, I always enjoy having a conversation with my partner about the larger picture, about what do you see from a different distance. He's not involved in the restaurants like I am.
Sounding board, a true sounding board.
Yeah. So it's really important for me to get different perspectives of, oh, you were in the restaurant last night, or, what have some of our friends said about the restaurant, or, you took clients there, and what is the response? And I think there's always great feedback to be had. And as long as you're able to listen and not take it personally, there's so much to learn. And I think when I look back, I would say that I think maybe you're the same. And Florian, anybody in this business who is around people all the time, I think you over time become very good at instinctually understanding who good people are. When you meet them, the first interactions, how they speak to you, the way that they act in certain circumstances. And, whenever I get involved in business situations now or relationships, the first and most important element of me making a decision about a partner is my instincts, my gut reaction to how I feel about them. And that's irregardless of their experience or the amount of money that they may or may not have, but it's just about, are they a good person? Can you see yourself working with them in difficult circumstances? And that has really helped me in my relationship. The partner that I have now is the same partner that I started with in 2011, and I can really tell you that it's the reason for our success. Is the partnership is so strong that we can talk about anything, and we have such an amazing relationship that goes beyond friendship. That is all about trying to think about how we can do things better, how we can always look at ways of growth, and continue to think about doing things well consistently. And having somebody there as a sounding board is extraordinarily important.
Mm-hmm. You, Travis, you as an American opening a business in Asia, in Singapore, what was from your point of view, the most challenging thing in opening there? I mean, I was lucky enough to open some stores in Los Angeles some years ago, and as a German, I can say it is a different story. So I can imagine that for you as an American, opening in Singapore is also coming with some challenges and differences that you had to cope with.
Yeah, when I originally arrived in Singapore, it had all the makings of an incredible large urban city with all of the wonderful attributes that come with being in a sort of busy, bustling place. The one thing it really lacked at the time, especially early in the 2000s, was a sort of international restaurant scene where people could experience all the different cultures and regions of the world that you might find in, say, New York City, Paris, London, Berlin, and so on and so forth. And I thought to myself, like, every great major city has a oyster bar. Every great major city, has a great pizza place, regardless of whether it's in Asia or Europe or America. And, I never looked at being in Singapore as a hindrance to me opening a business. Mm-hmm. I always thought to myself, like, this is just where I am. And I looked at all like the different elements of running a business, from staffing to opening costs to the market itself. And, once I became very comfortable with living there, understanding the people, the culture, their eating habits, all the different elements that go into thinking about a business, it became very clear to me that Singapore was on the verge of becoming an amazing international city. And then shortly after, of course, definitely into 2011, there was a number of, Michelin star restaurants that started to come in, which was the first time that had happened in Singapore from across the world. It really started to build momentum. And I think I was in the right place at the right time. And I certainly was able to capitalize on being a sort of early mover in that regard. But I think overall, my success here is, I think mostly attributed to the fact that I really believe in the people of Singapore and the quality of work that they can do and the ability to really want to be trained and to become professionals. Because for so long, especially in some of these Asian countries, if you want to go work in a restaurant or work front of the house, it's not looked at as a really, a profession that is looked upon highly. My background and my experience is that this is what I do. I'm a professional. And when people see that, they see that there's opportunity and possibility. And so I think that's something that I've really thought about, when it comes to the success of our business, is just, making sure that you give people the opportunity to be successful in this amazing business and treat them as professionals and hold them accountable. And, I think you'll see that they really, they respond to that sort of level of interest, from someone like myself.
Mm-hmm. Travis, when you build such a business, like really hands-on and very tied to the kitchen and very tied to the people and to the guests, you obviously learn tons of things about business. And that's a business podcast, and we're going to have enough time to talk about that. But I always find when you build such a baby from scratch, you learn even more about yourself than you learn about business. So looking back to this career so far, what do you think was the main learnings you had as a human being, as a mensch, so to say, on that journey? What did you learn about yourself?
Yeah, I think so much of what I thought in the kitchen that I was good at, actually, when I started to run the business, I also realized that those were not just skills of mine, those were traits of mine. So for example, being able to take incredible amounts of pain and suffering when you work in a kitchen, especially in the early years, the amount of work you have to do, the hours, the sacrifices, the physical endurance that you have to have. I always thought of this as a skill, like something that I learned and that you have to have in order to be successful in top end kitchens. But also in business, I think, especially as I learned to grow and to run businesses, I think, those same skill sets turned into really something that I think benefits me, but also the group very well. It's like I have a propensity to probably work too hard at the beginning, but only because I believe that in doing, you set the example for everybody else. So for me, when I start something, even if I don't know how to do it, for example, when we started, I didn't know how to do any of the admin work or the payroll or, paying of taxes and so on and so forth. And so I said to myself, well, I can learn that, how hard can it be? And, just asking myself, how do I do it? Figuring out what things I need to do to learn about it. And going all in is something that, I really think is a strong aspect of our ability to be successful. So, really pushing myself to the limit when it comes to learning new things, not being afraid to just because I didn't go to school to become a businessman, so I didn't know how to operate as one. So, but always thinking to yourself that if you can do something well, you can do other things well, and you just have to apply yourself. And so, I've learned a lot about myself in the past, about just being able to overcome obstacles that I thought were insurmountable in terms of business. But that is, I think the ability to just do it is something in that I really think is super important to my success.
You just said obstacles, and this is a podcast also about drives and how to regain doubts and how to regain drives. Can you take us to a roadblock, an obstacle, a doubt you had, and how you overcame that, and how you regained your drive after this?
Yeah, I think especially when I first started, I had no intention of growing more than one restaurant. And after the original opening of the restaurant in 2011, we had great success. And by 2013, I had a tremendous amount of great staff that worked with me. And I was coming to the situation or the decision that I had to make about keeping some of these staff because they were all extraordinarily capable and successful with me. But I couldn't continue to provide them with opportunity because I had this one little restaurant that could only account for so many people. And so I had to make a decision that wasn't really entirely based on me, honestly. It was more based on the team that I had. Was like, should I open another restaurant? And the answer was like, yeah, because these people that we have working with us are amazing. And if I don't provide them opportunities, someone else is going to find a way to provide them an opportunity. And so, I know it sounds easy, like when you have great people, you just continue to grow, but that something clicked there for me where I was like, okay, I have all these wonderful people that work with me. If I can open another restaurant and give them more opportunity, then I can keep them for longer, and hopefully they can continue to grow with me over time. But that next step, I think you might have heard from other people on your podcast, but when you go from one business to two business, it feels it feels momentous. It feels like it just is the biggest leap. When you have to go from one to two, and I really struggled with overcoming my doubt, because I always thought, oh, the first one, I'll never be able to replicate the success of the first one. When you do a second one, there's just no way. And that fear of failure, the fear of like, you're a one-hit wonder, or you don't know what you're doing, you just stumbled on success, was definitely something that I thought about a lot. But when you have great people and when you give them opportunities, so much can happen that's great. And when we did the second restaurant, it fortunately turned into a very successful second venture as well for us. And that is the continuous model that I use now when we think about growing. It's our human capital over financial capital, which is, do we have the right people in the right places to continue to grow? And, now after 4, 5, 6 restaurants, it's a much easier, pathway to thinking about building a new business. But certainly the first to the second business was extraordinarily difficult, but made easier with great people.
And what helped you in that situation to overcome the fear of failure? Was it a person or special persons or advice? How did you do that?
I think my partner was instrumental in helping me understand that, Travis, it's okay. Like, you have all the tools necessary to be successful. We have a great team. We have a great business model. We have the right people in the right places. And sometimes when you're in it, like I was every day in the business, you don't necessarily have the ability to zoom out and see some of the things that you do really well, but also understand, the real important things that make businesses successful. And I thought it was just because I worked hard every day and that was it. But the truth of the matter is that we had a lot of great processes. We had a lot of great standards and procedures. We had, amazing rapport with our guests. We worked really hard on creating consistent products and experience for people. So, when he framed it like that, it kind of made me realize that it's not just about me. It wasn't about me being in the restaurant every day that made it successful. It was the environment that as a team we created that created the success that would allow us to have success in the future. So, I give a lot of, I think, of the success to him and allowing me to see things from a different angle.
You also said before that you are a person who gets all in, and we had some people here on the podcast who actually made a distinction between family and business and what is first and what is second priority. How much do you think you have to be willing sacrifice when it comes to success in our industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think all of us in this business, we don't look at it as a job. It's a lifestyle. It is who we are in some ways. Like this is a sort of identifier of the type of life we live. Thankfully, my spouse has been always incredibly supportive of what I do. And she was involved in the first restaurant with me as well, until we could no longer work together, because we couldn't separate business and family. So, I have to say there's a lot of sacrifices, especially as an entrepreneur you make. And, sometimes the sacrifices weigh heavy on other people in your life. And, having people who are really committed to the success together with you is very, very important. But, I think when you have a really, really strong belief about something, whether that's in business or, life or hobbies or passions, I only know one way to go after it, and it's 110%. And sometimes that is a wonderful way to look at it. And also you have to realize it comes along with some difficult, decisions and things that happen because of it, because you lose sight of people in your life sometimes, you can't give attention to certain aspects of your life that need to be. But I think, as always, whenever you invest in yourself and doing the things that really make you happy, ultimately the people around you also benefit from that. But you have to be able to balance the difficulties that come with it, because I think the reality is that sometimes people make decisions that are difficult to live with, especially if you have a spouse or children. It's very hard, and I'm not the best at balance. I think I'm getting better, but I think also there's, for me, it's foot on the gas when things are ready to go. And, I hope that I'm able to, sort of corral everything in my life so that everything works smoothly, but sometimes it doesn't. And that's when you need really strong people in your life to settle you down, or to give you advice, or to make sure you're doing okay, or to make sure that, they're not doing okay. And to really look in the mirror and to make some decisions about how to move forward. But, you can't replace energy and drive and passion for moving forward. I think it just comes with some difficult situations that you have to manage.
And I think, Travis, it's stories like that when we get the feedback on whatever channels to say, it helped me so much to listen to that, listen to the struggles, because I think it's always, when you're in that moment, which you just described, it's like, for us, it's like always the world goes under, and it's so important to get the perspective and to show that and share that it's completely normal in the life of an entrepreneur, that if you want to be successful, it's that 110% and that foot on the gas. You just need to wake up at the right moment, and I think find that perspective back. I want to come to the next topic, and there is a quote from Rainer Becker, very famous chef, and as you know, the founder of Rokan Suma, and the quote we liked so much from him is, he said, if you want to be successful, you need to kill your ego, and that's especially difficult if you're a trained chef, because we're all trained with big egos and attitude and confidence. In scaling from one restaurant, you shared that you never plan to have more, and that one restaurant probably you need a strong ego to run it. But now running 6 and also now going back and forward to Japan and also to US where you live, how important was it, or how difficult was it to let that ego go and the control go and put your team and the systems in charge? Was it something which came easy to you or rather difficult? And how would you advise people to do that more smoothly?
Yeah, it's a great point. I have to say I was somewhat blessed that I realized that quite early on in my career, but I definitely had the ego elements way up until just about I opened, when I opened Luke's in 2011. As chefs, you're trained to sort of have this gravitas and this confidence, and along with that comes a tremendous ego sometimes about how you look at things and how you do things and how they're done and how you expect other people to do them. But when you have to build a business and worry about making sure you pay payroll and worry about making sure your team is taken care of and your guests are looked after, and you get the instant feedback about, whether or not you're doing the right thing in the restaurant by seeing the looks on guest faces. I think a lot of it is a very humbling experience. At least it was for me. It was very humbling to see that, or to know that I was responsible for so many different things on so many different levels for other people. That really helped ground me to understand, it's not just about what I'm doing in the kitchen and what I'm putting on the plate. It's about how I'm treating people, how those people are being looked after. It's about my promises that I made to them that I'm trying to keep. And, finding a way around your ego can be extraordinarily complicated, because that's what you've been trained to believe is your your secret to success is the ego or the thing that you have. And I think in all restaurants we've come to love and enjoy all over the world. What you find in most of these restaurants is an incredible humility, an incredible graciousness, an incredible level of care that the entire team wants to put into some guest experience, and not just about one person. If you're going to a restaurant that is literally all about one person, typically that is a very, let's call it, empty experience in my assessment of things, because you really want it to be about everybody looking after you, and about, not just the person who's cooking in the kitchen. But ego is, I see this all the time, especially amongst young chefs, but even chefs that have worked for great chefs who want to go out on their own and start a business. The first thing I tell them is they have to lose the ego, because that is the thing that's going to hold them back ultimately when it comes to thinking about how to put together a restaurant that really strikes a chord with people. And remember that you're not cooking for yourself always, you're cooking for your guests. And if you forget that, you've forgotten the whole idea of what being in the restaurant business is all about. And, that goes to the front of the house, and that goes for anybody that's, working in the restaurant. You must release yourself from your ego in order for everybody to experience an amazing, experience in the restaurant.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Travis, if we look into your business model, and you are next to oysters, you are also selling a lot of beef. And we had Riccardo Giraudi from Beef Bar also on the podcast. If you would make a SWOT analysis about your business model for the future, is beef something that you would put in threat because people are hesitant to eat more beef, or carbon footprint, methane, everything related to this? Or how would you tackle that? Because I can imagine this is a challenge for the future for your business.
Good question. It's funny. Our menu that I wrote in 2011 for Luke's is 95% the same as it is today. And I think about trends in the way that I think about how life is evolving. And certainly over the last 10 to 15 years, people have wanted to eat more healthy, wanted to eat a more seafood based diet or vegetable based diet. And I also think about when people come to restaurants, they make a decision. Why am I coming here? Is it experiential? Is it because we're celebrating? Is it because I'm looking after my diet and I want to eat a certain way? And I think there's places in the restaurant universe for all those different types of restaurants to be there. I will say in our case, we're a very specific restaurant that focuses on, quite honestly, two very specific things, seafood, oysters, especially, and beef. And I think for me, I just want to be the best I can be at those two things and offer people products that I know exactly where they come from, how they were raised, and what benefits they have for those people. But so I don't necessarily look into too much about whether people are going to eat beef 10, 15 years from now, or whether they're going to eat oysters or seafood. I think restaurants are timeless. People, trends come and go. I think we've all been a part of and seen these trends over the years. But I think when you go to a place and they do the same thing extraordinarily well, and they focus very intently on the product and knowing exactly where it comes from, and really putting a lot of effort into sourcing and finding the best of the best, those restaurants tend to do typically very well over the long term. And so for me, that's even in our pizza restaurants and our Mexican restaurant is the same. The sourcing of the product is always the number one aspect of how we start the business when it comes to the food element. Finding the right flour for the pizza dough, for example, or, for our Mexican restaurant, sourcing corn directly from Mexico to grind in the restaurant to make our tortillas. So, all of it really is about, finding the right products, the best products, and starting from there.
Yeah. And is there anything right now, because this is is there anything actually that you would say, okay, this is a problem in our society, in the world, in my business that keeps you up at night? Is there an actual doubt you're having?
I actually don't have too many doubts other than, as we saw during COVID, the logistics of getting food from one place to another is extraordinarily complicated. In some places like Singapore, for example, that has no agricultural abilities, not because they don't want to, just because the sheer size of Singapore is so small to accommodate any sort of large agriculture. This is
you go vertical, huh? You go vertical.
Yeah. I mean, you can grow things on buildings as much as you want or above buildings, but I think, that definitely scares me, and it put a lot of things into perspective for us because, we brought in a lot of things from other places in Singapore to get what we need. So, it's incredibly scary to think that at some point, if something happens again, that we could have those same challenges. So, growing things in buildings or finding other alternative methods of growing products nearby is certainly something that countries and places need to think about. But, shipping things from all over the world is very, very complex and very costly. So finding alternative methods and finding products that you can use closer to home definitely makes a lot of sense.
So Travis, as an American opening, let's say US style or New England style chop houses and oyster bars in Singapore and now in Japan, there's an obvious question, especially now as you move back to US, why not opening one in US? Or is there anything which is holding you back, or you want to not have a restaurant at home, or what's the reason why you're taking the time? Because also what was very interesting when we talked to Rainer Becker, and who opened as you know, over 30 Rocker and Sumas, he was so afraid to open that one steak restaurant in Germany, at one Japanese restaurant in Germany, because they said, if I fail at home, everybody's going to find out. So he really was very open to share his Schwellenangst after having basically around the world this huge success with Rocker and Suma. What is it, why we're not seeing the looks at home, so to say?
That's a good question. And I think, I've vacillated up and down about, or coming up with reasons why I should or shouldn't open restaurants here. I think first and foremost was that my move from Singapore to the US happened about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. And partially it was to see if this model could work for me, where I could have businesses in Asia, continue to grow them and build them with my teams. I go back often, and just stabilize that relationship that I have with Asia and my businesses. In regards to America, there's an amazing opportunity here, incredible growth opportunity, incredible markets within America, especially here in the Northeast where I'm located now. And, I will say that I certainly have gotten the itch to try and look at some opportunities here. Mostly when I think about restaurants in America, I think about making sure that it's set up correctly. And so I'm spending a lot of time thinking about how to properly set up a business here, versus, for the long term, whether that's purchasing real estate and building the business from scratch. But the equations and the economics of running businesses here in the States is quite a bit different than running in Asia, for example. And, I'm just trying to understand it, trying to learn, trying to become a student back here to understand how to do it correctly. But, it's not that I'm scared to open here. I certainly will find an opportunity at some point, but my team is all back in Asia. So, they're a huge part of our success. So for me to do something here, we'd have to find a way to, integrate them back into the business in America, which I haven't quite figured out yet, if that's possible. We're starting to make moves in that, figuring out that, that sequence by opening in Japan, which we just did last winter. And that's given us a great sort of education in how to run businesses between two different countries. And we continue to think Japan is one of the best places in the world to do business, especially in restaurants. And so we're going to continue to focus there. But Singapore also has still tremendous amounts of opportunity. And, I think my access to that market, and I think, just my, my sort of, my intelligence when it comes to, Singapore and specifically in the restaurant business, helps us to create restaurants that are going to sustain and are going to be successful there. So I think, that's where my efforts and my energies are at the moment. But, America is wonderful. And I think at some point you'll see restaurants here, but, I'm a very slow mover, very conservative when it comes to starting a new business. There has to be so many things that fall into place at the right time. So, we'll just continue to look at things and see how it plays out in the future.
So first we take Japan, and then at the end of the career, we take US.
Manhattan.
Yeah, before we go to the final question, I would like to see, like, as a, let's say, Travis 2.0 version, early 20s, and now the 4.0 version. If that 2.0 version, let's say, right within Cornell or at the beginning of Cornell would look now to the 4.0 version, how would the younger version see yourself now? What do you think would the younger Cornell Travis student think about that current version?
I think in many ways, the younger version would see where I am today and think to himself, like, yeah, that's probably where he would have ended up, because this is, listen, I've been in this business, I think, Mario as well, but I've been in this business since I was 14 years old. I've literally done nothing else. I've never worked another job that didn't have anything to do with the restaurant business. So for me, whether it's being the chef of a restaurant or running and owning several restaurants, this is sort of, my whole life was set up for this sort of trajectory. And I think, the fact that I ended up doing it in Singapore, probably through a curveball, was a bit of a curveball. I think, I would have seen myself in America, doing similar things. But the fact that I ended up in Asia, I think speaks to the, I think curiosity that I had when I was younger, to go see things and to try new things and to be open to new places and ideas. So from that perspective, it doesn't seem so maybe difficult to see that that's where I ended up. But I'm a huge believer in people. I'm a huge believer in doing things well, and I think that is something that I think over time has really served me well, and will continue to serve me well. But the younger version of me is not that dissimilar, or is not dissimilar from the person I am today. I've always been pretty consistent with my trajectory and who I want to be and who I am, very comfortable in my situation and how things are organized in my life. So I'm just very thankful that I have a lot of great people around me that help me build these businesses. And, as an entrepreneur, you need great people. Nobody can do it alone. And, as long as everybody benefits, there's a great story there.
Travis, to wrap up, we always try to get the advice to the struggling entrepreneurs out there, because like a lot of people, or several times during the career, all of us struggle and have the roadblocks and have the amount of workload and dust and clouds around us. And it's always good to get a fresh perspective on that. And if somebody from our industry reaches out to you and said, look, I'm facing this tremendous problem, independent of that specific problem, what's the kind of first tool set you as a mentor or buddy, or just like some random guy who we run into can give us an advice how to overcome roadblocks and get back into the driver's seat and regain drive? What's the tool set you would try to apply with that friend?
Yeah, there's always two rules that I use and you've mentioned one of them earlier, which is always take a step back, take some time, get some perspective. Oftentimes when you look at things that are happening that you consider to be catastrophic or really, something very serious, either a business or a decision you need to make, you often benefit by just taking a day or taking 2 days to just think about it, think about the reality of the actual issue that's at hand, talk to some folks that you might trust, to get some additional perspective about what's going on. That has always been super helpful to me because I'm a very emotional person. So, oftentimes I'd like to react very quickly and sort of make a decision based on emotion. I've learned over time that I always benefit from just taking a step back and not looking at it like it's the end of the world and thinking to myself, okay, this is solvable. There's a solution. We can find an answer, but we just need to take some time. So that's number one. And more specifically about entrepreneurs is, so many of us, including myself, would always make excuses why we couldn't at the beginning. It's too expensive. The rent's too high. The location's not right. This, that, and the other thing. And the truth is in this, if you want to go out into business in the world, life is not perfect and you just have to go and do it. And doing is something that you think is actually quite an easy thing to say to somebody, just go do it. But so many people sit and harbor and contemplate, and they don't actually do the action of what they say they're going to do. And until they do the action, there's really nothing else that you can give them in terms of advice, right? Because, if they at least go out and start it, then the process starts happening and you can alert them to certain things that might come up along the way of that journey for them. But, the actual doing is the hardest part. It's, that's when all the floodgates open, and that's when all the things start to happen that require all the different skill sets that you might have or the talents that you might have to come into play. But, sitting behind a desk and thinking to yourself, oh, I just don't have the capital, or I don't have the opportunity, or you got to just go out there and do it. And don't be afraid to fail, because failing is not really, as bad as it seems. It's as we all know here, failing is just an opportunity to learn more. And all learnings are super valuable in this business. And I'm sure I'll be a much better, business owner, boss, husband 10, 15 years from now than I am today, because it's just continual evolution of learning. So I think that's what I would say is those two things.
Yeah, it sounds so easy when Travis said it. You just need to do it. Like going across from Boston, from US, to go to Singapore and open a Oyster Bar and a Chop House. And I think it came quite through that he said, like, all the time, since I'm 14 years old, I haven't done any other job. And you really felt that, like a true hospitality person.
Absolutely.
So let's compare learnings, Lauren. What do you have?
So where do we start? I mean, he started with the framing basically the uncertainty he felt and how he became more confident when he said he just needed to do it. It gave him more confidence to overcome the uncertainty. And I think it goes hand in hand with the saying he had that you have to do something and action is needed.
And he came back to that, and you saw really when he started, he really saw the dialogue in his head. He said, I almost heard him talking to himself. He said, you know how to do it. You just need to do that. Like this dialogue. And he came back at the end when we came to the advice. He also gave the advice to this entrepreneur. Said, you just had to do it. I think as he came back to them, it's really, I think his dialogue. And he said, when you do it, and he chose another word like we had in the podcast before, action creates momentum from Clive, but he said, you need to get your foot into that door. That's the sentence he chose.
Go out there and just do it. Get your foot in the door. It's really strong. Then we asked it quite a lot, and it's interesting to have another perspective here when it comes to a business partner. He said, you have to choose a partner in business as choosing your partner in business is as important as in life. So
strong sentence. And he also said business partnership goes beyond friendship. I like that too, because we had several times this a partner is more than than a friend. We even had like this comparison with what Tom Barton said from Honestberg. He said like it's almost like a sibling. Yeah. I think also somebody else said it needs to be a twin. What I also felt, and I know quite well, Travis, but you also felt it. He said what is the learning you made about yourself? And he said it was that I could really take pain and suffering. And it's a very strong sentence. Like I understood it's not just a skill, it's a trait to take pain and suffering. It's a very strong sentence.
And that comes along with what he explained about that he's a hardworking person. And he also mentioned that he maybe worked too hard in the beginning. But then you often have that with these entrepreneurs and founders that they simply have to lead by example. You cannot make excuses. You have to. Somebody has to do it, and basically the founder has to do it, at least in the beginning. But he said also out of this process you will learn things, and how important it is to actually go all in.
He said all in, and he said later down, but it fits here together. He said all in. 110%, very specific, is the only way. You need to have the foot on the gas. And you could feel that, like it's a very strong personality. All in, 110% is the only way, foot on the gas.
Absolutely. Then we were talking about his doubts. Now, when he started, he said the biggest leap is from one to the second restaurant he made. And that he was struggling a lot with doubt in that time, that he had fear of failure, as he said. That it would
fear of being a one-hit wonder.
A one-hit wonder, right? So
I think that's really something we see more and more. And there's restaurateurs out there, and two of them are even friends of us. And I still remember like how difficult it was for them to open that second restaurant. It was such a big success, the first one. I said, why are you not opening the second one? And then I said, like, what if we fail? Yeah, it's like we cannot or we don't want to be a one-hit wonder.
I have something else, which is for me, at least in this context, a completely, let's say, or a new perspective, because he said the people around you, they will benefit from your happiness that you gain through your work. When we actually, we always have this conversation with our guests, what comes first, family or business? And he actually didn't make a contradiction out of it. He actually combined it by saying, I like to work and this is my life in a way, since he was 14. But when I'm happy, the people around me are happy to benefit from that. That's a nice,
very nice new nuance. Yeah. Then we confronted him about the ego, kill your ego, and he said, as a chef, it's finding a way around your ego is complicated. I like it. That is complicated. And then he said, but as a chef, and I really like that, he said, you need to remember, you don't cook for yourself, you cook for your guests.
Right.
And this is really something, because you want the credit from the guests, so you really need to put your ego down. You don't need to cook it. We always had this discussion, remember when we discussed about specials on new products, but I mean, we always say you cannot force your guests, no? Sometimes you need to educate them, like erziehen, as we say in German. But at the end of the day, you not cook for yourself, you cook for your guests.
Yeah. So I only have his 3 top learnings, so to speak. One of them is, we heard it also quite often, but it's probably very important to repeat and repeat and repeat again. Take a step back, take some time before you take important decision. You can benefit from 1 or 2 days, and you can also benefit from additional perspectives.
100%. And Katie from Meals and Chocolate always said you need to sleep 1 or 2 days about it. And he said also this perspective. He said, it's not, whatever it is, it's not the end of the world. Yeah. Also nice. Whatever it is,
totally.
It's not at the end of the world. Then he had this, life is not perfect, just do it. I mean, we had that at the beginning. We covered that.
Yeah.
And then he had the last one to say, failure is an opportunity to learn more. We had that from John when he said failure, doubt, it's just the other side of the coin. Where we're back at the main topic and the name of our podcast, From Doubt to Drive. And I think that was a very good one.
And I have a last one.
Always has another one, like Columbo. I like Columbo.
One more thing. And there's one more thing, because I want to quote Travis here, because that is, it's actually going quite well with the title of our podcast. He said, drive comes with difficult situations.
That's a good one. I think we also need to have that now as your Columbo trademark of the podcast. That
one more thing.
After I close it and everybody's hanging up, Mr. Schneider comes back
PS.
with the last learning. That was fun.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you, Florian.
Like always. See you next
Bye.
week. Bye.
Wow. We hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we did. But sharing is not just caring. It is also empowering. So recommend this podcast to fellow entrepreneurs who might need a dose of inspiration. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss out on future episodes. Thank you for being part of the community From Doubt to Drive entrepreneurs only. Mario and Florian are already gearing up for the next episode. Until then, stay tuned, stay driven, and we'll be back next week.